Hello everyone and welcome to a casual revisit for Ikenfell. By this time in my channel's life, I have recorded a lot of casual reviews for a lot of video games, and quite frequently I forget that I've ever made a video about some of these video games. That is not the case for Ikenfell, however. This one has always been in the back of my mind. I think it's really stood out to me in terms of its story and its characters, and I've always wanted to return to this someday, and so I'm glad that I finally set the time to do so. The story starts with our main character. I think you pronounce her name Marite, and she is looking for her sister Safina at this witch school called Ikenfell. Now, originally, Marite is what's known as an ordinary. This is a person that does not have magical powers, think like a muggle in the Harry Potter universe. But when she approaches the school grounds, she quickly discovers that she has the ability to conjure up fire magic, which is something entirely new, never before seen in Ikenfell. One thing that I really like about this game is that all of our witches, all of the characters have unique, different, specialized magic instead of all being able to conjure the same types of magic. And so you'll quickly encounter a secondary character to be in your party named Petronella, and she's like an alchemist and has like these potion-y kind of spells. She kind of acts as your party's healer, and then you encounter like a character with electric magic. And so I do like how specialized and unique every character feels, not just in terms of personality and backstory, but also in terms of their magical abilities. It is a fairly unique combat, I would say, but there are a lot of elements that are plucked from other games, and so you start on the right end of this grid, the bad guys start on the left end of this grid, and the grid is, I want to say it's like 3 by 12 squares, and so you have a certain amount of movement. Usually you can move like 3 or 4 squares, and then depending on what magic ability you're using, you have a certain magical range that surrounds you to attack enemies. And every magical spell feels unique. They all serve a function depending on whether, like, what kind of range you're looking for or what kind of effect you're trying to acquire. I really enjoyed setting traps in this playthrough because the traps would disrupt enemies, and I feel like enemies were kind of dumb in that aspect. You could set a trap like right in front of them and they don't really recognize that, and then they just hop into the trap their next turn. And so traps were incredibly useful, and I think that they went underutilized my first playthrough of this game. It also has this active time-based situation where you have to press A at the correct time in order to either maximize your damage or minimize the damage that you are taking. Think similar to like a Paper Mario or a Super Mario RPG. Unlike those games though, the timing of this game can be very tricky. For some of the spells and some of the attacks, there's not like a really obvious indicator on when you should be pressing the A button to maximize your output. It always felt like you had to press A a little before the contact would happen. And so because of that, if this is an issue for you, like it was for me, you can go into the settings and you can kind of like tweak how generous it is with the A button. You can turn on like a semi-automatic A button where it will always at least give you a nice, but you can still time it even better to get a great, or you can just turn it up all the way where every attack you deal is a great, every attack that you defend is also a great. I feel like that would significantly make the game easier, so I kind of did this like auto balance. When I first played this game, I had that completely off because I was playing this game handheld. In this playthrough, this was kind of like my cozy game before bed, and I was playing with the Joy-Cons wirelessly on my Switch, and so I felt like there was even more of that timing barrier, and so that's kind of how I justify doing like this semi-automatic setting, so I always at least got nice. But still, like the output difference between a nice and a great timing is quite exponential, and so it was still very rewarding to try and get those greats. That being said, I do think that I had an easier time with this playthrough than my first one because I turned that setting on. Because some of the enemies, especially late game, their attacks can be fairly tricky to defend, and so it's it's actually pretty convenient to have that always nice defensive maneuver activated. While the combat itself is a unique and interesting take, I do feel like the combat can get fairly sluggish and repetitive at times, and I find that I'm often just trying to push through all these repetitive combat scenarios because I want to get back to the story. That's the really big thing that's drawing me towards this game and has had me thinking about it ever since I played it initially. If only there was some way to just kind of like speed up these combat scenarios, just make them a little snappier, a little quicker, I feel like that would be a great bonus for the game. But the enemies themselves are fun, they're unique, especially early game. You get a lot of fun, quirky, silly characters. Now they get obviously more scary and serious the further you go along, but even then, it is fun in like a Mario and Luigi type of way where you're trying to like understand the enemy's attacks and how to successfully defend against them. And leveling up is always exciting because I loved getting my stats up. Once your characters reach these certain landmarks, they learn new spells, and so it's always exciting to figure out what the new spells do. You can only have 3 characters in your combat party at one time, and so if you want everyone to be exactly the same level, you'll kind of have to swap them all out and play with them all, even though the ones that aren't in your active party will accumulate, I don't know, it's probably like 90% of the XP, 80 or 90%. So even if you don't use a certain character for the majority of your playthrough, they won't be like that underleveled. It still is in your best interest, though, I would say, to initiate combat whenever possible, because sometimes this game can make you feel fairly underleveled, especially if you don't have that semi-automatic setting turned on to maximize your output and your defenses. By the end of the game, I was level 26 or 27, and I do feel like after you pass level 25, you will probably start getting diminishing returns in terms of your stats. I did notice once I got to level 26 and 27, I was only getting like 1 bonus point to each stat. And so I feel like level 25 is almost like a soft cap for where you should be by the end of the game. I do wish, though, that I could initiate combat similar to something like Paper Mario. I wish I could just kind of like throw out a little fire spell or something like that at enemies and then start combat either with like combat initiative, or maybe the enemies all take a couple points of damage at the beginning, and that might help with my complaint about the combat feeling a little too slow, taking a little too much time. Really where this game shines, though, I think, are its characters. I touched on this a little bit already, but all of the characters are incredibly lovable and relatable. I think pretty much every character in this cast are at least in some part of the LGBTQ plus community, and so it feels really unique in that way where you're not just playing like a white cis male. And their love affairs and their attractions to each other are certainly on the forefront of the story, but I don't think that they consume the main plot of the story either. And by the end of the game, you know, after the credits, there's an epilogue, and I'm not going to spoil it here, but I was fairly invested once more into like who ends up with who and what all the characters are up to now that the main plot of the story is over, and it left me craving even more. And because this game didn't really get the attention that I feel it deserves, I doubt that we would ever get a sequel to this game, but it left me craving a sequel to Ikenfell. I like how in this game, rather than everyone just hating everybody and we dislike the bad guys and stuff, there's not really any like bad guys in Ikenfell. It's just everyone has their own side of the story, and it's really like a story about empathy and love and conquering those negative feelings and learning how to overcome them. There is this whole world to explore in Ikenfell. I wouldn't say it's like a giant massive world, but there's a decent level of side content that you can search for. Hidden throughout the school grounds, there are these little shiny spots that you can collect shiny gems, and then you can exchange them for different accessories. There's a whole equipment system here where you can buff up all of your stats. I do feel like some of the accessories worked really well for some of my characters. For instance, there's this lightning witch called Gilda, and she ended up being like the star of the show for me, both in the plot and combat now that I think about it. But she was really strong, and I was able to find this like accessory that does damage to all the enemies that are around her when she starts her turn. And so I came up with this really unique combo where I would teleport her right up to the group of enemies, do a ton of damage, and then she also has like an additional AoE attack that she can do, and she would just like wipe out the enemies in one turn. There's a decent level of puzzles throughout the quote-unquote dungeons of Ikenfell. These puzzles never felt too frustrating. I would say they're maybe on the level of like a Legend of Zelda game, but not even that complicated. I never got to the point where I'm frustrated and I need to look something up. If anything, I'm just stumped for a minute or two until I figure it out, and they are fairly generous with letting you like restart these puzzles. Even with combat, if you get like a game over, it's pretty much just like, hey, do you want to restart this combat scenario? And so there isn't ever any like backtracking. There's a ton of these like mystical trees that act as fast travel points if you ever want to like go back to a previous area. And the game is just oozing charm. Like, I love these pixely aesthetics. I love the music. I think it was done by the same people who did the Steven Universe soundtrack, and it really shows here. It's like a blend of these 16-bit tracks mixed in with like real instruments. There's a couple scenarios where you get these vocals for your music as well. I think each character gets their own theme song, and a couple of these do have lyrics in them, which is nice when it plays. It almost kind of like throws you off when you first start hearing a lyric in this game, because up to that point you're just reading the character's voice in text. Even like the saving points are just these like sleeping cats that you pet, and their purring soothes you, so you heal your HP, and they meow when you save, and it just fills you with a bunch of cozy good feelings. And it's not that long of a game either. I didn't go for a 100% completion of this game, but it took me about 15 hours, and I do feel like I did the majority of the stuff. Looking at my previous save file, that seems about on par of what I did the first time around too, and so I certainly stopped to smell the roses once more. I wasn't going straight to the end like I normally do for a second playthrough. I remember the first time I played through this game, I gave it a 5 out of 5, and I'm going to give the game the same score this playthrough. I don't think that my opinion of this game has diminished during this second playthrough. If anything, it has grown even more. Like, this is really a special gem. I dare I say a hidden gem? I don't think so. I think it did gain some appreciation when it first came out, but I feel like the gaming world has moved on, and I don't think I've moved on. So I'm still going to sing praises of this song. I'm still very happy that I did get the physical copy of this game through limited run games. There's been a couple other limited run games where I thought, you know, I really didn't need to spend that money. I probably could have bought this on sale digitally and I would have been fine with it, but this is not the case. I am definitely glad that I have the cartridge of this one. Well, guys, that's it for me. Let me know if you have any questions or comments about Ikenfell, and I'd love to hear what you have to say. Otherwise, I'll talk to you later. Bye!